RedBud, my dudes.
I've been hustling all day. There's a way better way through canals and alleyways. Oh, boys. Not only do we have a RedBud replica track, but we have a RedBud 2000. A lot of you boys probably weren't even born yet when this track came out. This track was made by Fat Muppet on MX Bikes. So one of the coolest things about this track right here is the aesthetic and the look of it. It's like you're literally looking at a picture from the RedBud track back in 2000. You know how those pictures from that time frame kind of have a different look to them than like if you go take a picture nowadays, right? Just those pictures from like the 90s into like the early 2000s, they just had a certain look to them. And somehow, I don't know how this dude did this. I don't know how the Fat Muppet dude did this, but he made the aesthetic of this track actually look like a picture from 2000. Do you know what I mean? So that's a pretty cool thing to this track right here. Another thing to this track, this is a perfect example of speed creates skill gap to a track. There is so many tracks on MX Bikes, I feel like they're built in a way to where it doesn't even allow you to get going fast enough to create enough of a difficulty / skill gap range. Do you understand what I'm saying? You've got to make it where you can go fast enough in the first place to create that skill gap. That speed, it just creates this irreplaceable skill gap feeling to a track, right? This irreplaceable separator to a track. It makes it to where it becomes a little bit more scary because you're going faster everywhere. Not everybody's going to have the balls to just hold it wide open fourth gear on a 450 around these corners, right? And it's also going to create this sort of ability where it almost like forces you to get on the brakes in the corners because of how much speed you can pick up into the corner. There's a lot of tracks on MX Bikes where it's like, why would you even get on the brakes in the first place? Because you're not even going fast enough to even need to get on the brakes. Do you know what I mean? You've got to create enough potential speed on a track, and everything plays into that. You know, it's not just the track scaling, it's the traction of the track, it's the friction of the dirt, it's the roughness, the scaling, the corners, how everything flows. You know, there's a lot of things that goes into that to create that potential speed feeling, but if it doesn't get fast enough, if there's not the potential to go fast enough on a track, it severely limits the skill gap of it. That's a really big problem with a lot of the modern day RF replica tracks on MX Simulator. They've got such a high friction, sandy feeling to it that it limits the power of the bike so much that it then cuts down skill gap because it cuts down your potential speed. And then that cuts off your throttle control potential. That cuts off, you know, then everybody's just wide open everywhere, right? This track doesn't really feel like that. It feels like there's a lot of spots where you can get going really fast. You know, it's got plenty long distance of lanes and stuff like that, but at the exact same time, the corners turn in a way to where it kind of puts you in this situation where you got to figure out, do you want to get on the brakes? Do you want to try to really lean that bike over? You know, you kind of have options like that because of how much speed you can get going on this track. So I thought that was really cool element to this track right here. But yeah, I mean, let's just keep it real. It's about as good as you're going to make especially like a retro vibed national for MX Bikes in 2022. It's about as best as you can do that. I'm giving this track a 10 out of 10. Plenty of roughness to keep you engaged. Plenty good scaling to create skill gap. The jumps are plenty big enough. They're fun. If you come up short, you'll pop off on like the bigger triple by the stands. I'm guessing that's Larocco's. I got a little confused now that I'm thinking back to it. That probably is Larocco's. That's funny. It's been so long since that layout. I've not really seen a whole lot of tracks with like a 2000 layout, right? It's got a very different layout to it, but yeah, it's got that feeling where the jumps are actually you have to think, a little bit on them because you don't want to come up short or you run that risk of popping off, but you also don't want to over jump because the original jump peak jumps you high enough to create that potential pop off, right? So it's got that nice range of where it's like big enough of a jump to kind of add at least a little bit of fear in your mind, a little bit of skill gap to the jumping of the track. And even what I love a lot about this track is how he really played with the, like playing around with the jump faces as far as like kind of, I don't even know what you call that. It's kind of like pre-made, but not, it's like editing on that jump face to where it's not perfectly smooth. You know what I mean? Kind of adding that super, like more of like a realistic, naturalistic kind of jump face vibe where it almost feels like you kind of got pre-made ruts going up the jump face. It almost feels like you kind of got a little bit of a kicker vibe on some areas of the jump face and stuff. They got more of a natural feeling than that like perfectly man-made, smoothed off. Do you know what I mean? They got more of a natural feel, which I love that. I love that kind of feeling, no matter what game it is. It gets very boring riding on every custom track where every jump face is perfectly smoothed and rounded, and do you know what I mean? I like that more naturalistic vibe to it. And the roughness on the track kind of has that sort of design to it as well. So yeah, I mean, for what this track is trying to be, for what it is, for the time frame of this game, it's definitely 10 out of 10. I mean, I don't really know. I guess there's a couple of corners that might could have put one extra rut in it instead of just having one inside pre-made rut. But again, he is trying to go for a retro, old school. You don't want to come in here and put like pre-made on this track like you would have on a, for instance, like the Netherlands GP track that everybody loves in the game. You don't want to put that kind of pre-made down on this track because then it's not going to have as much of that retro vibe to it. So, you got to know what kind of track you're talking about. Do you know what I mean? You got to know what the creator was trying to accomplish with this. And I feel like that he did exactly that. But yeah, man, fun to throw whips off these jumps, fun to try to carry that speed, got just enough roughness to where it can kind of throw you off your center balance when you're really on the gas. One thing about MX bikes, man, I'm starting to realize this after playing this game quite a bit, it just simply does not have the same speed feeling of MX Simulator. It's not even close to the same speed feeling. Even when you're wide-ass open, fourth gear on a 450, it's like it just doesn't have as much of that jump in visual speed feeling when you go from like wide open in third to fourth gear, right around that like mid to top end of the bike. You know what I mean? It doesn't, I don't know, it just doesn't have as much of a boost feeling as what I feel like really getting on the gas on a 450 in real life would have to it. It doesn't create quite as much visual speed feeling. Do you know what I mean? It kind of feels like you're going the same speed whether or not you're wide open in third gear or wide open in fourth gear. There's not much of a speed feeling to that, And I don't know, man. I mean, I feel like that's something they could improve on down the road with updates with MX bikes. Just make it feel like you're going a little bit faster when you're wide open fourth gear on a 450. It's gotta have more of that screen coming to you type feeling. You know what I mean? And that's what creates the fear and the scary, like, oh shit, I'm hauling ass, It creates all those kind of feelings when you have a proper speed feeling to it. But I've always kind of felt like that a little bit with MX bikes. It's got a decent speed feeling when you're going from like a complete stop to like second or, like second gear, first, second gear. It's got a decent little speed feeling right there. But I'm talking specifically when you get in that like mid-level power of the bike, like that third to fourth gear, and you're still holding it wide open fourth gear all the way down a straightaway. It just, I don't know, something about it doesn't create enough of a speed feeling for me personally as I feel like it should. Do you know what I mean? It kind of starts getting into that where it just starts getting in that coasting type feeling, even though you're fourth gear wide open on a 450. Do you know what I mean? Instead of feeling like you're really fucking moving, it kind of feels like you're more so just coasting. So hopefully Poboso can make some improvements on that in the future. It would certainly make a track like this feel a lot more kind of scary when you're going fast, which is good. You want it to feel that way. You want it to feel kind of skill gap scary, like I'm scared to hold the throttle down because it feels like I'm about to shoot off to the moon, you know? It's got to have a little bit more of that feeling to it. But yeah, overall, solid track right here. Fun. There's a couple lines where you can go like inside to double to the next inside rut. Couple of fun little flowy line options on this track that I felt like really played into the track right here. And yeah, as far as the off track, all of it just plays into that 2000 kind of aesthetic, you know? Like I say, it looks like feels like you're looking at a picture from 2000. You know what I mean? If you've ever seen some of those retro, where them boys is out there taking pictures, you know, back in the 90s and early 2000s, it's kind of got that look to it. So nonetheless, man, awesome track right here. Fun for everybody, man. Even on the bigger jumps, you can just go way outside in the berm. Should still be able to hit every jump on this track, no matter what bike you're on. So yeah. Love to see these better track designs for MX bikes. I've been waiting on this, you know. It's been a rough road. Let's not pretend here, right? When MX bikes very first came out, I know it's still in beta. Calm down, MX bikes fanboys. But when it first, you know, you could download the game. You gotta love how I gotta explain this shit to the bitter end. They'll say, well, it's still in beta, Spencer. It's not even out yet, bro. When you could first download the game and play it, okay, up until like 2020, there just really wasn't a whole lot of good track content. You know, it really, that good, solid scaling, skill gap level custom track content really hasn't started being put into the game until like 2020 onward. You know what I mean? And I still feel like we're almost to that point with a lot of these custom tracks where I feel like they're really fucking good. You know what I mean? We're almost to that point. And same way with the aerial Supercross series, that Oakland track, you know, it's getting closer and closer to where I think it needs to be. These tracks are just moving into that little bit bigger scaling, so you can carry more speed, creates more skill gap, bigger, little bit taller jumps, bigger rhythms, you know what I mean? And it's kind of moving into that, right? And it's the same way with like when you build up your berms and your inside ruts, as much as Fat Muppet has here on this RedBud 2000 track. That in combination with allowing you to get a shitload of speed, what that does is it creates that skill gap of hauling ass, but then a big enough of a berm or rut to carry the speed. You know, a lot of tracks, especially a lot of the stock tracks on MX bikes, first of all, it's hard to even get enough speed going on them in the first place, but then the berm is so smoothed off, or the rut is so smoothed off, that you just have to slow way down instead of being able to really carry that wicked fourth gear tapped out, you know, speed level like you can on this track right here. It just creates so much irreplaceable skill gap when you build a track like that. And that's one thing I really do love about this track. You got to know how to hold the gas down. You know what I mean? You got to know how to control that bike at a higher speed level, and not everybody knows how to do that in this game, so you can separate yourself in that sense, right? A lot of tracks you simply can't even separate yourself in a speed sense. It's like you got to try to separate yourself in a hitting a corner super tighter or whatever. You know, your skill gap has to come from somewhere, you know what I mean? And a lot of times on a motocross track, it comes from how much speed you can get and your roughness in combination with how banked up your berms are. You know, all three of those things kind of intertwine together to create how much skill gap is on a motocross track. And I feel like this track right here has got a decent amount of all of those three things right there, right? So yeah, man, nonetheless, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. We'll be back on that next one. Later, big dogs.